While they're working on that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Matt Slate. I am a 96 grad of East Carolina University. I have a biology degree, so it makes perfect sense as to why I'm here. But I spent the last 25 years at Bank of America. I've spent 27 years in the financial services and banking industries. Spent the last 18 of those 25 years at B of A trading in New York. And that, if you've ever seen a trading floor is just about, you have about just about as much space as you guys have right here. And it's a floor of about 500 people. And so what I found in working in that environment, one, was intense, but two, you're interacting with people all day long. There's no way to avoid the interactions. And if you don't, when Dean Harris asked me to come and speak about something at the leadership conference, I started to think about what do good leaders do, and where do I see people struggle in those types of environments. And it really came down to kind of like two real simple concepts. And so, concept of trust, concept of disruptions. Everybody in here, I think, if I asked you what is trust, you give me a definition. It would be close to each other. But let me grab this better. All right. So that's me. In March, I actually retired, which is kind of weird. I'm just about 50, and I didn't think that would happen either. And moved back to Greenville, North Carolina. But we get back to the concept of trust. And when you think about trust is just something that's hard to build, easy to break. What I wanted to do was take a moment before we really get into trust and talk about what are traits of a strong leader. And I do want this to be interactive, so I do want people to speak up and talk, and let's see where the things go. But if you think about, what do you think about when you think about what is a trait of a good leader? Anyone? Someone start. Yep, empathy, accountability, honesty, confidence, right? Integrity. Yes, ma'am. All right. So, but all of those things are characteristics of the human, right? And so when you're thinking about leadership, you're thinking about how you set an example, how you portray yourself. When do you think it's too early to be a leader? Right. Never. Right? You can start. If you don't think that way, start thinking that way. Right? You can be a leader of yourself. You start. Right? You can hold yourself to a standard. You can show up every day and work on yourself. And by the way, all of us have things we can work on. So when I started thinking about what's the trait of a leader, all right, there we go. So these are some of the things. These are not all the things that I think of when I think about leadership, but these are just some of the traits that I find leaders are effective at doing. And the biggest one is setting an example, right? Every day when you I know some of you are not just students, but have jobs, right? That's how you go through college. You can show up to the job, you can just say, I have a role, I do this role, I go home. Or you can take the opportunity to look at that role, actually get a skill set out of that role, and take something that you can build into a resume, that you can build into your story. And there's two different ways, that you can kind of approach every single task you do, whether that's a group project, whether that's interactions, whether that's relationships. But I wanted to, kind of think about me a little bit when I was putting this up here. I'll tell you, when I started my career, I would say I was very consistent and a very hard worker. But the second one down on the left, listens to feedback, I was horrible at that. I did not take feedback well, right? I had to learn how to take feedback. And that's, not everybody's going to be perfect, and not everybody's going to nail all these skills, but that was really one of my weaknesses. And I found that not listening to feedback was what ultimately was holding me back, but also probably made people not trust me, right? Just because when you gave me feedback, I went back at you, right? I was all, you know, it was making an excuse.
I was all, you know, it was making an excuse or coming up with a reason as to why something's like that. Instead of listening to it, thinking about it, changing my behavior, and moving forward. So that was, you know, that's one of the things that I did struggle with. Or it was just kind of, you know, I would tell you how good of I was doing a job, and I didn't do that. I could, you know, I should just do it by example. So that was some of the things that I found. Some other stuff that, what do people think about this list, I guess? What's missing? This is just my list. I just kind of throw it up there in the context of what do I think, you know, good leaders do, how they approach them.
Maybe it goes into
Exactly.
making tough decisions, but definitely courage.
Maybe it goes into making tough decisions, but definitely courage, right? Because when you, whether you're at the junior most role on a team, or you're the leader, you know, stepping kind of outside the box is really challenging to do because you're going to get feedback, right? You're going to have to be able to take it at times. What other ones? Yeah. Dedication is a big one. One of the things I've found, particularly in young associates, is the concept of consistency can be hard, right? And so I'm gonna being in New York, we have a lot of young associates. We had a lot of young associates. Probably not dissimilar to Fridays in class, but Fridays at work were challenging for the 22 to 26-year-old range. For whatever reason, because New York has a lot to do and a lot to do on Thursday nights. So, but when you think about consistency, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a person that performs here 3 days a week and here 2 days a week? Would you rather have somebody that actually performs in this range, never hitting this high, not also hitting that low, but very consistent in what I can expect coming into a team? Right? And so like you have to start to think about, you know, when you're engaging within a team, and most of you guys are going to probably come out of this, out of the university, out of ECU, and you're going to join some sort of team. A few of you are going to start organizations on your own, and you're actually going to have to start at the top, setting example. But the rest of us start somewhere in the middle of this, right? And consistency is something we can all control. So that's something to think about when you're thinking about your leadership skills. And that was probably the thing I did well. Like I said, the thing I didn't do well was listening. And so that's one of the other things. Yes.
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 What is the biggest individual contributor how you're managing?
Yep. I think where I see
Yep.
everyone struggle.
I think where I see everyone struggle at times is relinquishing control and allowing people to do things their own way, right? Because he's going to do something different than you're going to do something, right? It doesn't mean it's wrong. It means that you have to trust people and get into the concept of allowing people to develop and grow in their own way. You know, there's a standard that, you know, you may have, this is the way I think this should be done, but there's a lot of different ways to get to things. So empowering people to think and trusting people to do things differently. I think that's one of the things I've seen people struggle with. Of like, oh, well, they do this completely differently, and that's not how I would do it. Well, do they get to the goal? Are they, you know, what you also can do as a leader is step back and learn from that. Say, oh, I would have never have thought that was the route to that solution, right? And so it's actually encouraging people to be individuals, to think, to come up with solutions that may not be exactly how you were going to do it. It may not be the same solution, right? It's actually, you know, that's I think that's one of the harder things I've seen people have from a translation standpoint. Tell you on the trading floor, it's tough because most traders are about as type A as you can get. Really good ones listen to other people's opinions, but most traders tend to just say, this is the way it's going to be, this is what I think, and this is what I'm going to follow, and they don't adjust. And it works probably 60% of the time. When the world gets volatile, though, you have to kind of change your thought process, or you get chewed up. I learned that the hard way too. It's 2008. I learned that. If you were, if anyone remembers 2008, it was a global financial crisis. But that was probably my biggest learning experience in my career. It made last year the best trading experience of my career that I learned in 2008. But I put that in my toolkit, and it literally sat for a long time. And 15 years later, I drug it back out, and I was like, wait a minute. This market's not going to move one standard deviation or two standard deviations. It's going to blow all the way out, further than anybody's going to expect. So how do I actually prepare myself and my book from a positioning standpoint, and really got into rates? But if I had not gone through it in 08, I would not have done that in 23. And I watched a lot of younger traders fall down and skin their knees in 23, and they'll remember it now. But you kind of have to go through the process. All right. Where are we? I want to try to keep things on track. All right, talk about leadership.
It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate.
Not what you preach, what you tolerate.
So for I think when I was growing up, my father used to say to me,
I think when I was growing up, my father used to say to me, my father was an educator,
he always used to say to me,
principal,
mean what you
school
say,
administrator. And he always used to say to me, mean what you say and say what you mean.
It was like one of those things where
He said over and over and over, and it was like one of those things where I was like, whatever.
as I got into
Right?
the world of working with teams,
But
I got into the world
as I got into the world of working with teams, and I got in the world of thinking about relationships, I realized
as a
you
leader.
can't have two sets of rules
And I've seen that happen
as a leader.
multiple times.
And I've seen that happen
That person's special.
multiple times where that person is special, right? Or that person has, we're gonna let them slide on that, but I'm gonna hold you to a different
Not
standard.
just when you're a leader.
So when you not just when you're a leader, but when you're actually sitting, in the most junior seat, right? You don't want to have two sets of rules. And why do you think that?
Not consistent, right?
Not consistent,
Does.
right?
Distrust. The other thing I found,
Does distrust.
person.
The other thing I found
You're actually having
is
this
the
other
person that you're actually having this other set of rules for, the one that's hurt the most.
that actually struggles.
They're the
with
one
meshing on a team.
that actually
They're the one
struggles with meshing on a team. They're the one that
Get to the solutions because
can't,
everyone else is either
get to the
afraid
solutions
engage with
because
them,
everyone
afraid to
else
interact
is
with
either
them,
afraid to engage with them, afraid to interact with them, or doesn't trust them because they feel like they can't have the same communication they can with the team. On my trading desk, at different parts of my career, I saw this, and I saw how that separated people, right? So all of a sudden, you have one trader that we think has special treatment, whether it's real or not. Perception is reality, but they had special treatment. They were never able to succeed because sales didn't want to work. Sales would work on everyone else's axis because they were afraid, of what that person would say or do on the back end of it, right? So you can't have two sets of rules.
And if you Leaf is, by the way, he was a
And if you Leaf is, by the way, he was a
this is a really good book.
he was a Navy SEAL. I don't know if anybody's looked. This is a really good book.
Talks about
Extreme ownership,
when
and it talks about leadership when you are in extreme situations. So you think about leadership in Iraq. He ran the SEAL teams in Iraq in the second Iraqi War. If you remember Chris Kyle, the sniper, he actually worked for Leaf. But he talks about losing soldiers. It's a tough read, but it's really good because he talks about owning the process, owning everything about your decisions, owning your team, owning your own role, and how if you don't do that, you're going to you set yourself up for not being able to succeed.
That's kind of traits of a strong leader. But when I talk about owning the process too,
That's kind of traits of a strong leader. But when I talk about owning the process too, right? What do you think
what is your
about ownership? When you think about what is your responsibility as an employee, as a teammate? What do you think your responsibility is on the team?
part, right? But
Right.
building
Not
your
just doing
skill
your
set,
part,
right?
right? But
I think that that's
building your skill set, right?
one of the things I've also
You know,
seen
I think
people
that
struggle
that's
with is like do you approach
one of the things I've
each
also seen people
job,
struggle
each
with is
task
like
as
do you approach
a task?
each job, each task as
Or do you
a
approach
task
it as
completion, or do you
something I'm gonna
approach
learn, I'm gonna
it as
master, right?
something I'm going to
That mastery
learn,
one
I'm
makes
going to
me
master,
But
right?
two,
That
it
mastery,
actually
one,
allows
makes
me
me
to
better.
work with other
But
people
two,
that I
it
see
actually
struggle.
allows me to work with other people that I see could be
That's
struggling
the
with it to
difference
pull them up,
in my mind
right?
about ownership.
That's the real difference in my mind about ownership.
Whether
Whether you're at the very top of a team or at the very bottom of a team, your ability to pull people up instead of breaking them down is materially more important, right? So the pull up is the big thing that I find about ownership. So when you think about, man, this seems really simple. And I'll tell you, I spent the first 18 months of my career doing nothing but financial spreads. I'd sit down every morning. Before I went to work at the bank, I worked at Moody's Investment.
Every morning I would get in.
Debt rating agency. I spent 18 months. Every morning I would get in, and there would be, 25, 30 Qs, Ks, whatever, that I needed to spread the financial statements. Not the most exciting thing to do, right? And so I could just sit there and say, hey, I got these things spread. I sent them to the analyst. Or what I tried to do, that was my original approach. But over time I started to go, I should probably pay attention to what I'm doing. Why does this matter? Why do companies, why does John Deere, a manufacturing company, look so different than a service provider? Why do they have assets? Why doesn't this company not have assets, right? Why are margins so materially different? What's impacting income statements, cash flow statements? And I started to actually get into it, right? So as a biology major, here I am trying to figure out financial statements, right? But all of a sudden it was like, wow, I can see there's a story in just the financial statement that you can see. Before you even got into trying to figure out what management's doing. So I was able to take that small skill and start to build on it. But it was also, those jobs tend to have people kind of run through them, right? That entry-level job, you're going to find that in your career. Your first few jobs are just that, right? They're either going to be something that's a task or something you're actually going to master and move up. So that means I was able to actually help people develop. So that's kind of talking about owning the process.
So my goal, I hope, what we did was.
So my goal, I hope, what we did was we tried to we reverse engineered trust, right? We talked about all the things that it takes to kind of build trust, and so every one of you is going to have kind of a different path in how you do it. Your style is going to be different than his style, right? And there's nothing wrong with having different styles. That's
So when you're a leader,
kind of be about personal approach. And so when you're a leader, to your question earlier about what's the hardest thing, one of the hardest things to do is to appreciate everyone has this different view, but allowing them to develop and giving feedback where you need it, but also sometimes just let's see where this goes a little bit, right? Instead of immediately stepping in and saying, that's not how I would do it. Let's let it run. Let's see what happens a little bit. You gotta see if someone else in their mind actually has this longer solution in there, right? Also means you have to build relationships to be able to communicate with them, talk to them. That's one of the things that you're going to find also is one of the hardest things is that you're going to have to make tough decisions as a leader. If you're doing it right, then you've got personal relationships with everyone. So tough decisions become personal, right? That's probably the hardest part in leadership. And sometimes you're going to make a personal decision that's really going to make one person happy, and really going to make someone else not. That's when you're going to find that your relationships are stressed. You also have to have a little bit of forgiveness in you as a leader, right? At times people get emotional. At times people are passionate and they care and they may say or do something in the immediate act. And sometimes you just have to let it happen, right? When you work on the floor, that's 500 people that are carrying on. There's some debate, arguing, loud. you'll hear some colorful things at the end of the day. My best relationship was with the two sales guys that sat behind me. And people would swear we probably hated each other because of what we said to each other. But we actually knew each other so well that we knew how to push for solutions, right? Because the salesperson is going to push as hard as they can. If they're doing their job right, for the best solution for their client. My job was to make sure that the bank executed for the client while not taking too much risk or risk that we didn't think was tolerable, right? Whether it's the bank telling me I don't have a limit to do it, or me and my gut saying, that doesn't make sense, that price doesn't work, we're not gonna make money, how does this work, right? So that, at times, was a natural rub. But we also worked hard enough together and worked through it that we would have those discussions during the middle of the day, and at 6 o'clock, yes, beers are on me, right? And so that was part of the process and part of the relationship. And that's the other tough part, is that a lot of times jobs do, yeah, it's 9 to 6, but is it? It really isn't, right? It's actually at times 7:30 to 8, 10 at times. Not every night, because we all have things we have to do. But there are times where you just have to say, hey, let's just go enjoy time together, talk, have a relationship, figure out what else makes people tick, right? And I wanted to know, you care about football, you care about different things in the community, what it is. If you don't know that, it really still becomes a task and not a team. One of the things that I think when I think about feedback and I think about as you grow is trying to change your lens when you're looking, we all are looking this way, right? But Blair's looking at me, and at times I've got to try to remember what Blair's looking at, right? And what his perspective is. It's particularly tough in tough decisions, in feedback, in watching how somebody's progressing and working on their job. But those that are really good leaders, I do find can actually change their lens, right? And step back and try to look at things from a different perspective. That's really, really tough. Who struggles with that? Right? Right. I think it's something that I don't think goes away whether you're 22 and joining an organization or you're 60 and you're the CEO, right? Or anywhere in between. Having that ability to step back and remember, let me go look through, right? If you're Ford today, right? That CEO's got a massive problem from a strike perspective, right? But he's also got to try to step back and balance what's best for that company with how do I get my employees back to work where they're happy and they'll produce a good product for me that customers want to buy, right? And that's really, really tough. Some of these solutions are really, really tough. I want to keep on time. I want to get to disruptions because like all of this kind of builds into what's, why do you need trust? I can guarantee you change and disruption is going to happen.
Tell me what your thoughts are on disruptions.
So, tell me what your thoughts are on disruptions.
You skipped my
You skipped my ending. But you're absolutely right. Let's talk about what the concept of disruptions are not new, right? I like Ford. Ford's an interesting company. What was Ford's biggest accomplishment when he started the company? Was it the automobile?
manufacturing.
Right. It was manufacturing. The concept of actually creating an assembly line. That changed the way America progressed forever, right?
You guys may not remember this, but I do remember because I was actually
You guys may not remember this, but I do remember it because I was actually watching it. When Steve Jobs was talking about iPods, and then he said, oh yeah, and one more thing. And he pulled out the first iPhone. The world changed. This one little idea changed, right? It built industries that didn't exist. Social media. By the way, it didn't exist when I was young. But that didn't exist, right? It also killed industries. The music industry almost died. The way the music industry worked, the way content was distributed, They were not ready for it.
Christian was the
If,
owner of a.
I know Christian. If Christian was the owner of a CD manufacturing company, guess what? Oh, by the way, did.
Right? So disruptions
Killed the company.
happen.
Done.
Some disruptions
Right?
you see coming.
So disruptions
You're
happen.
pointing out the
Some
exact
disruptions you see coming.
we all-
You're pointing out the exact one that we all see coming right now, and it's going to be a challenge for everyone in this room is artificial intelligence, right? The thing that I can tell you is that
you can have with a machine, right?
there's only so much of a relationship you can have with a machine, right? So using artificial intelligence and using technology smartly
All of
versus replacing all of your perspectives is not, in my view, is not the right way to run an organization. Some will, right? They will have no culture. They will just manufacture a widget until that widget doesn't work anymore. And then maybe they change and maybe they don't. But also be careful with artificial intelligence. You know, we can type in anything we want to ChatGPT or any of the other ones and get some answer. That doesn't mean that's the answer that's right for you, right? There are some things that are factual, but there's a lot of things that are opinionated, right? Right? Everybody in here has a different opinion about 1,000 different things. Well, that doesn't mean that that thing's going to answer it correctly. So you have to think about that when you're using artificial intelligence. I'm not saying you can't make yourself more efficient and better, right? But that's kind of one of my views. But what's another? Some disruptions are completely and totally out of the blue. We just had one 2 weeks ago in the financial market, in reality in the world, right? No one saw what was going to happen in Israel. But everyone in this room lived through a disruption that we had no clue was going to come. What was that?
COVID changed behavior.
COVID, right? COVID changed behavior forever.
Where people want to work.
It changed how people want to work. It changed where people want to work. It changed how people want to engage because people all of a sudden realized they could do things they think, always remote. I think you have to have a balance because if you're always remote, you never build a relationship. I'll also say that, on our team, we had a salesperson. She disappeared. I'm not kidding you. She disappeared for 2 years. 2 years.
If you ever looked at
Call in the morning.
and you could see whether she was
If you ever looked at Bloomberg
yellow all day.
and you could see whether she was green, yellow, or red, she was yellow all day. Hey, are you there? Hey, what's your customer? What's your client think? Nothing, right? Always an excuse. Always somewhere, right? You know where she was? Costa Rica.
That's what we figured out. Right? But it does change behavior.
That's what we figured out, right? But it does change behavior. It's a true story. That's where she was.
Disruption.
But anyways, when you think about disruptions,
Right?
some can be permanent. This is permanent, right? COVID, we did find a solution of how to live. And when you're thinking about,
As you're a leader and you're thinking about organizations, how
as you're a leader and you're thinking about organizations, how do you prepare for them? Because I can guarantee you they're coming. If you don't think change is coming, you will go the way of the dinosaur.
I think about does anybody
Will be
know
extinct
Blockbuster
at some
Video?
point. I think about does anybody know Blockbuster Video? You remember Blockbuster Video?
Before things started to
So,
go badly for Blockbuster.
right before things started to go badly for Blockbuster Video, this company called Netflix
As a small acquisition.
was pitched to them as a small acquisition.
If you read the story, they were in the boardroom for about 20 minutes.
If you read the story, they were in the boardroom for about 20 minutes. The Blockbuster CEO and his leadership team laughed at the
5
concept
years later, Blockbuster.
and told him to get out. 5 years later, Blockbuster shut the
So,
doors.
if
Done.
you don't,
Right?
don't embrace
So,
change,
if you don't embrace change or if you aren't open to seeing it,
it can be lethal to organizations.
bottom left-hand corner of this one, it can be lethal to organizations. It was lethal to Blockbuster. And we're talking about something that was on every block
So when
in
you think
every
about how you set
city
yourself up,
that you can think of. So when you think about how do you set yourself up,
toughest part, get back
anticipating change,
tough decisions,
the toughest part, get back to tough decisions. I forgot where we were, but willing to cut losses, right? Because that cuts people at
cutting
times.
people.
And that's really, really tough. But you have to balance cutting people, cutting resources versus losing an organization.
You think you're
But it also provides learning opportunities, right? If you think you're in a role where you're not learning, then you need to try to find a way to move
So I kind of
forward,
view that as
right?
leading
Whatever
through
that
trust.
next thing is.
If you don't have all the skills.
So I kind of view that as leading through trust. Because if you don't have all the skills that we just talked about, this will trip you up from a disruption.
What are thoughts, questions?
What are thoughts, questions?
Am I crazy? Does it make sense?
Am I crazy? Make sense?
Gotta be something.
Gotta be something.
That's a tough one. So the question was, how do you regain trust once it's lost?
That's a tough
right?
one. So the question was, how do you regain trust
That's
once it's lost,
Probably
right?
the toughest part, right?
That's
Because,
probably the
one, you
toughest
gotta be-
part, right?
first thing you have
Because
to do is you have to be willing.
one, you got to be. First thing you have to do is you have to be
apologies
willing
go a long way.
to admit it.
Uh,
I mean, apologies
you
go a
have
long
to
way.
have to take action and show we all
But
mess
you have
up,
to.
right?
You also have to take action and show
That's
that
the thing, right?
we all mess
This
up,
thing's
right?
not
We're all
human.
human.
Some companies will tell you,
That's the thing,
"I'd rather
right?
have a machine make
This
the
thing's
decision
not a
because
human, and
it
some
takes
companies
the
will tell you,
human aspect
well, I'd rather have a machine make the decision because it takes the human aspect out of it,
out.
right?
Creating something that's
And if you're,
so
you
small,
know,
so precise, yeah.
creating something that's, you know, so small and so
Molding the way
precise,
an
yeah,
organization
right?
evolves,
But if you're
changes,
molding the way an organization evolves and
you
changes,
have to admit you're wrong.
I say you have to have the human
See
aspect.
people
of it. So
struggle
you have to
with admitting
admit
they're
you're
wrong
wrong,
all the time,
right?
right?
You see people
You
struggle
make
with admitting
excuses.
they're wrong all the time, right?
It's
And when you
really
make
challenging. Let me ask you
excuses,
this question.
um,
You're a leader
it's really
of a
challenging. Let
team.
me ask you this question.
Someone
You're a
on your
leader
team
of a team.
makes a mistake.
Someone on your team makes a
You
mistake.
get questioned about it by your boss.
You
How do you
get
deal with it?
questioned about it by your boss. How do you deal with it?
Hmm? Yes.
Hmm?
It's your mistake.
Yes,
As the leader of the team, right?
your
Doesn't
mistake
mean you can't
as the leader of a team,
address
right?
it.
That doesn't mean you
One of your
can't
teammates, right? You can go,
address
"Hey,
it
Look, what happened here? Let's
with
walk
one of
through
your
it."
teammates, right? You can go, hey, look, what happened here? Let's walk
But
through it.
you sit down
Let's
and you
learn
go to
through
your
this,
boss,
right?
"Hey,
But
you know,
if you sit down and you go to your boss, hey, you know,
Lynn
I
made
would
that
call it
mistake."
Lynn, but it's not because of Lynn, but
Right.
Lynn made
You
that
blame
mistake,
him.
right?
Is he ever gonna trust
And you
you?
blame him.
Absolutely not. But you know who's not?
He
also
ever
not
going to trust you again? Absolutely
This is
not.
his
But you know who's
team.
not also not going to trust you?
They're gonna realize.
This is his team over here. They're going to realize
You know, for the scapegoat, he's not gonna own it.
he's always going to
Means
look,
if you go
you
back,
know, for the
right,
scapegoat.
we talk
He's not
about
going to own it.
owning
Which
the
means if you
process.
go back, right, we talk about
You didn't own it.
owning
as
the
a leader,
process.
Right?
You didn't own it
That's
as a leader.
A big piece
Right?
of trust. And to that
That's
point, you can lose
a
team
big
like
piece
that.
of trust. And
Right?
to that
Not like
point,
having two sets
you
of
can
rules.
lose a team
There's
like
a
that,
couple little things that
right?
you can
It's
do
kind of like having two sets of
really
rules.
will
There's a
destroy
couple
a
little
team. I've
things that
seen
you
this
can
happen
do
where somebody
that really will destroy a team. And I've seen this happen where
So that's
somebody,
something to really think about
you know,
when you're-
blame
you
someone.
finally get
And
to
so
that
that's
point
something to
where
really
it's
think
your
about when
responsibility.
when
Not
you
only that,
finally get to that point where it's
even
like,
if
this
you're
is
the
my
most junior
responsibility.
person
But not
on the
only
team,
that,
you mess
even if you're the most junior person on the team and you mess up,
Say, I messed up.
Own it.
It was a mistake. I'm learning.
right?
from it."
Say,
Right? Ask
I messed up.
ask
It was a
questions.
mistake. I'm
You
learning
find
from
yourself on a team
it,
where
right?
you can
Ask,
ask
ask questions. If you find yourself on a team where you can
It's
ask
also-
questions,
but I would try to find a way to move.
it's also
forward.
tough. But I would try to find a way to move forward and away from that, right? Because that team's ultimately not going to be successful if you can't ask questions. All right.
This is kind of my conclusion, and I really want to kind of add, I like
This is kind of my conclusion, and I really want to kind of add, I like this question, but what other questions do you have about it? Yes, ma'am.
I think what you're, it's a balance of
I think what
asking
you're,
questions,
it's a
observing,
balance of
pushing a
asking
little bit, not
questions,
all,
observing,
right? So
pushing a
depends
little
where
bit, but
you're
not
at
always,
when you
right?
first join a
So
team, I think,
depends on where you're at in joining a team. When you first join a team, I think what you want to do is just find a way to get to know the other people. You want to get into the role. But you do have to ask questions around, okay,
extreme ownership.
you know, we
understanding
talk in that extreme ownership. He talks about understanding the why.
But
And I actually really
understanding
like
the
that
why
concept too.
from ground up,
But understanding the why from ground up and understanding, being able to explain the why from ground down, right? Why do we do this this
What does
right? Why is this set up this way? What does my function feed into, right? And so you have to find a way to ask those questions, get to those solutions, to actually be able to grow and become better, right? If you understand that piece of it, if you can say, hey, you know what, I'm junior salesperson on the desk, and every morning I create a sheet that shows all the axes, all the things we were trying to get done last night, right? Well, what that does is that sets up the senior salespeople, the traders, mindset, walking in the door of, oh yeah, we had these 25 things we didn't get done yesterday, right? And that was one of the roles of a junior salesperson on our desk, right? It meant they had to come into the office at like 6:30 because I was going to get there at 6:45. So they had to be there at 6:15, whatever it was, right? They got efficient at doing it. A lot of times they did it at night. And they finally figured out I could do this at night and I got to wake up earlier. But I didn't tell them that. They have to figure that out on their own. But that concept, and the people that did it well, they got it. They were like, no, I know if I lay this down in front of you, I just made this team that much more efficient because we didn't spend 20 minutes going, what was I doing for you? What was I doing for you? What was I doing for you? They kept it all organized for us, right? And so they understood what that was and how that was incredibly helpful for the desk, right? And then they actually took that idea and they were like, what if we create ideas that we can send out to customers? What if we create all these other things that are going on in the market and recap what we did on the day? We show volume, we show interest in trades, we show price moves, we show all these other things. And we actually create a marketing sheet that we can send out to the customers. Wow, okay. Well, that wasn't what we were actually thinking, but yes, right? And so they actually, I watched people, that group of people actually own the process, figure it out, and they made it better and actually understood why it mattered, right? So it's understanding that kind of why concept. Question? Yes.
So, let's back up.
So,
you go to 2006.
Back up. So you go to 2006-ish, and you think about Bank of America before Merrill, before the financial crisis. We had trading desks that were very regional. So we had New York, Charlotte, Chicago, Texas, San Francisco, just in the U.S., right? And Merrill was actually just in New York, period. So, and then the financial crisis happened. But that decentralized process took a lot more communication. It took multiple phone calls. And we didn't have the telepresence that you have now, right? There wasn't a Zoom. There wasn't the ability to just hit a button and pop somebody on your screen, right? So it was pretty hard. And I would actually say if you step back and look at it, it probably wasn't the best setup, right? Because I never knew the people in San Francisco. They were just a person that kind of came over my phone sometimes. But I would say that the leadership actually did a pretty good job because they found a way, or they were somewhere every week, right? So they're in San Francisco for the week. They're in Austin for the week. They're in Boston. They're in, and so they would constantly be on the road traveling. So they did that from a high perspective, but it was very hard. I think, as the team moved out that level, it was hard for them because you just wouldn't know who people were. It's not easy, but you have to. That's the way companies are organized, right? And many companies are roll-ups, right? We bought that, we bought this, we bought that. The decision has to be made of, well, do you move everyone? If I move everyone, do I lose 70% of institutional knowledge because people don't want to move, right? I was on a team of 20 trader sales and research at B of A. You know how many moved to New York when the financial crisis was done? Take a guess.
He guessed 0. That's wrong. I was at least 1.
He guessed 0. That's wrong. I was at least 1.
1. I was the only one that won.
2. 1. I was the only one that won.
The reason the other people didn't go was because they didn't trust.
Yeah, the reason the other people didn't go was because they didn't trust the people at Merrill for one reason or another.
I looked at it as a different way of an opportunity.
I looked at it as a different way of an opportunity to try to figure out what it would be like to live in New York, what it would be like to kind of go from living in Charlotte, which is a less intense lifestyle, to doing it full time. And actually what I went back to them though, instead of just making the decision saying, hey, I don't trust these guys, I'm going to leave, I looked at it like this, and I went back to them and I said, this is what I'll do. Sunday nights, I'll get on a plane and I'll fly to New York. And I'll stay in a hotel either through Thursday or Friday of every week. So we get to know each other. You're going to pay for it. But I'm good enough that you'll pay for it because you want me on this team because you asked me to do it. Right?
They actually understood it. They got it.
They did. No problem. They actually understood it. They got it. And when the moment I saw that they got it, I was like, you guys are making this assumption just because you think there's a difference in personality. There was definitely a difference in personality, right? It just is what it is. But they were actually very open to wanting to find a solution. And when I saw that, the moment I saw that, I knew that I thought it would work. Because there wasn't even a pushback. They were like, that's very reasonable. We'll do that. If you're willing to be here and you don't want to move your family and you've got these concerns, right? I lived in a house that cost $250,000. So I knew if I had to go do something else, I could. I've had a job since I was 14, so I don't mind. We can go to work at Lowe's right now, no problem, right? I knew that. But I knew also if I was going to change my cost of living, I wanted to make sure I was doing it for people that I knew I could work with and survive with, right? And it was a really weird time. It was the most stressful thing I've ever seen from a stress perspective of what happened in '08. We can get, that's a whole other story. Legacy, and I hope I never live through something like that again. But it was interesting. What else? Yes, sir. Yeah, and you, that, her, permit too. Yeah.
Yes, I just told you the 1 gram. So the guy.
Yes, I just told you the 1 gram. So the guy that ran our global credit division, he could tell you what every trader's thoughts were. And he literally was the guy that would walk around the floor all day long. And what do you think, Christian? What do you think about this? Right? And when you get to talk to him sometimes, he's just like, you know what, come with me. Come talk to this person that works over in a whole different department, right? He just knew how to get people to do this cross, talk, think, learn. You should talk to this interest rate guy. I don't know anything about interest rates, right? But go talk to him. Let's just make that happen. You guys have to have coffee. You guys have to have lunch. I'm going to have beers, and he would strategically invite people to do that. Really good at just getting people to think and cross. And what I found about him, he had an incredible memory. He could put together those pieces and connect people and trusted people to follow through and to think through it. On the other side of that, I also saw a person in that same role. He sat in his office, and you had to make an appointment to talk to him. And that appointment. We can talk about it next Thursday. Oh, I see a great idea. We can talk about it next Thursday. Well, let me tell you something about the trading market. It's about opportunity. Sometimes it's about 5 minutes if you're lucky. Sometimes it's 10 seconds, right? You have to make a decision now, sometimes on 20% of the information you need. The guy that sat in the office didn't last very long. He liked to tell everybody how important he was. And he liked to use that glass door as something special to come through, right? That just made people irritated, right? That didn't foster cohesion. It didn't foster people working together. So I would say those 2 different kind of strategies in that same exact seat were very different in the success of the firm. And I will tell you that the P&L of the credit division was probably 4 or 5 times higher under the let's work together than it was under the everybody you do your own thing and I'm special. We had one last question and we'll get it done. No.
Well, I probably had my elbows too sharp, right?
I probably had my elbows were too sharp, right? I had a little bit too much of a chip, and I had to figure out how to unsharpen them. I had a really good friend that I worked with that was actually tell me that. He's like, dude, you just gotta. You gotta let people. You gotta listen. And it took me a little while of kind of walking into that plate glass door about 10 times. Maybe you're right. But I'll tell you this. This is one of the interesting things is that, and people don't forget that. So let's fast forward. 2000. I was up for mid 2000s. I was up for MD. I was up for managing director. That process is not easy to become MD within a trading organization on Wall Street. It's a long interview process. It's a long review process. It literally is like a year, right? It's kind of like getting tenure for professors and everything else. You really have to prove why it matters. I didn't get it the first time.
The reason I didn't get it,
Right? I had to go back and do it again. And the reason I didn't get it was because there was someone on that committee that 10 years ago hadn't really dealt with me that was like,
well, he's changed.
he's a jerk.
I don't know, I just remember that.
Well, he's changed. Well, I don't know. I just remember that. That resonated with me. So I left that thought in that person's mind, and they forever had that thought about me, right? And I never had the interaction time to kind of fix it. But I would tell you that people don't forget. So that's, it's something that, when I got that feedback, I had a standing desk and I wanted to squish my head in it because well, I've changed, but I know that they're not wrong. That was who I was. So, there's a lot of things in life that made me change. But, having a child will make you change. Being married, I've learned most of my good lessons from my better half. She gets me back in line when I get out of line. But that was something that definitely resonated with me. Like, man, decision I did 10, 12, 15 years ago, and that person remembered it, and it came back.
I hope this was.
Anything else before we? I hope this was. But my goal today was just to have you kind of think about how you present yourself when you go into an organization, how you present yourself when you go into a team, how you approach things, how you think about opportunities to learn, even if it's just the simplest skill. Don't view it as a task. View it as something you're going to own, something you're going to be masterful for. It's something you can build off of, right? Because every one of you is going to have your own individual story to tell at the end of it. And if you just compartmentalize, well, I just did these certain tasks versus I helped achieve this goal, it will change your trajectories.
Thank you guys for coming.
Hopefully that was the goal. Thank you guys for coming.